Hi there, welcome back to Teacher to Teacher. This is actually our third week, and in case you're new, in the last 4 episodes, we've been discussing different topics related to teaching and learning online. You can watch the previous episodes on the Macmillan website, and you can also download the handouts there. In any case, today is episode number 5, and we'll be talking about feedback. Feedback is actually an essential component of learning and teaching because it helps students to become more aware of their progress and to know exactly what they need to do to improve. What actually is effective feedback? Well, in the first edition of the APAC's spring workshops, which took place in Barcelona in April and May last year in 2019, Montse Irún, a fellow teacher and teacher trainer from Lleida, gave a really clear definition that has stuck with me since then. Montse said, feedback is giving information on how one is making progress to achieve a goal. So I think this is a really clear definition that shows feedback should be informative in order to be useful. And apart from that, Montse said that good feedback, effective feedback, should also be specific and well-reasoned. So students really understand what they have to do in order to improve their performance. You can download Montse's presentation from the handout, and you can also take a look at the presentations from other speakers in the first edition of the APAC ELT workshops. I'd love to tell you more about the second edition of these workshops, which were actually scheduled for last weekend, but unfortunately for obvious reasons they had to be cancelled. So hopefully the second edition will be next year. Any case, apart from that, feedback needs to be kind and constructive, especially at this time when we're seeing students not face-to-face, but actually only through a screen. So we're communicating with them online. And if you want more tips on how to communicate with students online, you can also watch episode number 2, which is actually just about that. Okay, so what are the keys to constructive feedback? Well, when it comes to giving feedback, Alba, a fellow teacher from Alicante, who I've mentioned before in previous episodes, and who you might know as Paréntesis Educación on Instagram, had a great post where she mentioned 3 points that you should include in your feedback. The first point is something that you liked, so a positive point about the student's work, a strong point. The second thing she said you should mention is something you do differently. And this is to refer to the weaknesses in students' work, but I think it's worded in a very nice way. So something I'd do differently, something I'd sort of change. And the last point is something I'd suggest for the future. So basically this is a call for action, ideas for improvement. This is what Alba suggested to give constructive criticism, and I can tell you it works really well with students because they get a very clear picture of their strong points and weak points, and also specific ideas on how to really improve their work. So try it out because I think it might work for your students too. The only thing to bear in mind as a minor point is that we should really keep our messages more expressive and more livened up than before, given the distance, to compensate for the distance. And like I mentioned in episode 2, a very simple way to do that is by adding emojis and bitmojis to convey a bit more of that human sort of affection that we're lacking right now. But in any case, check out episode 2 again on communicating with students to find out more on how to do that. Okay, so like most of you, I imagine, before lockdown, I gave most of my feedback either written on students' work or in person, face-to-face at school. But when lockdown started, the logical alternative was to use email or the comment features on Google Classroom. Written feedback is basically what comes out naturally to teachers because it's what we're used to. However, I've recently come across a great alternative to written feedback, which is spoken feedback, oral feedback. So instead of writing your comments, you record your comments and you leave a voice message, either in English or in the student's mother tongue if you prefer. Maybe you could do that with lower levels, for example. How could you do this? Well, this is another Google Chrome extension, yet another one, how many? Chrome extensions do you have by now? And it's called Talk and Comment. It's a very simple extension to use because it basically allows you to record messages just by clicking on the play button, and it generates an automatic link that you can then post online on your students' work. So after you've installed the extension on Chrome, you will see a little microphone button on your screen. You just click on it, start recording, and beware because there's no countdown, so you need to be ready the moment you click on the button. You press stop when you're done. And then, like I said, a link is automatically generated and you can post it online, for example, as a private comment on Google Classroom, or also you could highlight specific aspects of students' work on a shared Google Docs or on a Google Slides, and you could comment on their work by doing this, by leaving a message. Okay, so this tool is really amazing and it enables you to give feedback in a much more efficient way. Also, like we discussed in episode 2 of Teacher to Teacher, by recording your voice, you're making your feedback a lot more personal and relatable because students will feel like you're discussing the work with them right there. Finally, voice messaging is something that the students are used to. So they're familiar with this format because they're normally WhatsApp their friends and voice message their friends all the time. I must admit my students were a bit shocked the first time they received my oral feedback because they said they felt like I was WhatsApping them a voice message. But after their initial shock, they were actually very happy with the feedback because they said they could listen to it more than once, paused when they needed, and also that it felt less academic than written feedback. So obviously, I still give written feedback to my students, but I try to combine both formats, and I feel this is also a way of livening up the interaction with them and of relating to them in a different way and in a way that feels less boring to them. So they don't always associate feedback with boring. In any case, I learned about Talk and Comment on Twitter from a teacher from Pamplona called Gorka, and he has this short tutorial on how to give feedback to students using Talk and Comment, but also using Vocaroo and Flipgrid. So I've left the link to the tutorial in the handout so you can check it out and look at the 3 tools that he talks about. Plenty of food for thought. Okay, so we've discussed how to give feedback to students, but do you also ask students to give feedback? In previous episodes, I suggested setting up a Padlet wall to ask students for their opinion at the end of an activity or at the end of a class. And I think this would also be good for peer-to-peer feedback, where students could comment on each other's work because everybody can see everybody's input. But I personally feel it's really important to ask students for their opinion because learning about their point of view gives me a different perspective, a different angle on my work, and it enables me to improve what I'm doing and to cater for my students' needs and wants. So apart from Padlet, what other online tools can you use to ask students for feedback? Well, one that I especially like is called Mentimeter, or Menti for short. It's a tool to create very visual polls that students can reply to instantly, so you can get their feedback on the spot. Of course, it can be used in a variety of ways across many subjects. And for example, I have a friend who's a maths teacher in secondary, and he uses Menti to check students' understanding of the concepts they've been working on during class in that week. And by doing this live, he gets students to see which of the concepts they have the most trouble with, so they can ask further questions on the spot. You can also use Menti as a survey. And for example, last week, I used it with my SO4 students to ask about their opinion on English class. And students had to rate a series of statements about the amount of work they have in English, about the quality of the materials that we're using, and also about if they're feeling whether they were learning English or not, despite being working online. And so students on their mobile phones had to rate each of the statements from 1 to 5, 1 being I totally disagree, 5 being I totally agree with this. And the cool thing about Menti is that on the spot, you can get a graph of the averages of all the people who have responded to the questions. you cannot really see who says what actually, but I think this only contributes to making it more objective and private. So students feel they actually do have freedom to say what they really want to say. So after all the students had responded, you get an overview of all the answers, and you can download the answers as a PDF or as an Excel sheet or as a screenshot. And what you could do is you can post them on Google Classroom, or you can send them to a fellow teacher to compare them with other groups. So the activity I did with my SO4, I actually told them that this was a bit of a test to see how I was doing my work and how English class was going. And they were very surprised to see that I was actually putting myself to the test for once. And so, for example, in the question whether they thought the amount of work they were getting in English was reasonable, I got a 2.8, which means most of the students thought they get a bit too much work in English. Oops. So because I was doing this live, I could ask them for further feedback. And one of the students said that they would rather have until Sunday to submit their work instead of Friday. So what I did was go to my Google Classroom settings and change the deadline to Sunday. So as you can see, asking for students' feedback is useful because they see that you take them seriously, that you take their opinions into account, and that practical changes can be made. It's not just a matter of them complaining about the amount of homework. So in any case, when everyone had responded, we went over each of the items one by one to ask them for further feedback. And it was great to see that the students were actually taking this seriously and were actually really giving their opinion and making comments. And one of the comments they made was that they especially enjoyed the materials we're using, and even more specifically, the videos to do with inventions and about the history of graffiti on TED-Ed. I mentioned these in the session on tools to work online, to teach online. But if you missed them, you can download the handout from this session and you'll find all the links there. So, like with all the tools I recommend, using Menti is very easy. You just need to set up your free account and start creating your polls. You can choose from 9 different types of questions, ranging from multiple choice to open-ended to the scales that I previously mentioned I use with my SO4 students. And once you finish writing your questions, you need to choose how you'd like to see your results. And after that's done, you just need to share the poll with your students so they can take it. The easiest way of doing this is by giving them the students the access code, just like you do with Kahoot. So students will find it very easy to figure out how Menti works because it's basically just like Kahoot. So students need to access the Menti website, www.menti.com, and input the code you give them, and instantly they'll be able to answer the questions in the poll. Alternatively, you could also send them the direct access link, but I find that a bit trickier when I do it on Zoom because some students have trouble accessing the websites that I send them. So I find the best option a bit more practical. In any case, like I mentioned before, once everyone has replied to the questions, you can download the results in different formats and share them in any way you like. And just as a final thing, I found a tutorial about Menti on EdTech Teacher, which I've actually posted in the handout as well. And so if you have any questions on Menti, you can go check out this tutorial, which is actually very clear. And if you have a bit more time in your hands, you can also check out the EdTech Teacher website, which has plenty of articles on online tools, which are actually very useful at this time. So finally, just to give you a taste what Menti is like, I've designed a Menti to ask you for your opinion on today's episode. And so you just need to head over to the Menti website at www.menti.com and input this code, 666572. The code will be active until Thursday morning, and we'll be sharing the results of the poll with you in the next episode of Teacher to Teacher. Don't forget to participate. In any case, that was it for today's episode. As usual, I hope you found it useful, and we're really looking forward to getting your feedback. Bye for now.